16th work study session. If you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I am not seeing Mr. Hammer. Is he in the audience somewhere?
He is, and I will bring him over to be a panelist here.
Thank you. At our retreat the council had earlier this spring, one of the requests was a Transportation 101 or an informational session for the council on what the Transportation Committee has been doing and some basic transportation information. And so we invited Chris Hammer to give us that presentation, and he's here and I believe ready to go.
Appreciate the introduction and welcome to the transportation update. Are we able to put up the slideshow? Brandy, can you do that for me? Because unfortunately, if I do it on my computer with Zoom, it doesn't show the whole thing. So, yes, I'm here tonight with you.
Just a second. Let's see. Is it up? Can you guys see it?
It was, and then there it is.
Okay.
All right. So I'm presenting tonight from Public Works. Also, our Director Dorsey's here in the audience to answer questions, help answer questions later. Asking you to hold questions till we get through the slides because we have limited time here. As Beck with the introduction has said, so the Transportation Committee asked me to come and present some of the educational information that had been presented to the committee, go over some of the highlights of the committee and staff work in the last year or so, and then also provide an overview of our work plan for the remainder of this year and going into 2022. We're going to go ahead and start with a kind of a video. It's a Transportation System 101 video that kind of gives you the context of transportation in the cities. Should I bring that up, or is that?
I can get that here in just a second. Let me see.
Think about it.
Can you guys see it and hear it?
Almost every trip in Washington begins or ends on a city street. And as Washington's population and economy grows, so does the demand on the transportation network. City streets are more than just a road. Above ground, they're bike lanes, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, lighting, landscaping, but below are sewer, water, stormwater, electric, and cable utilities. And when a street is built over a waterway, it even incorporates fish passage into the design. Our transportation system is one of the most valuable for today and the future. But our city streets lack a sufficient revenue source. City transportation systems must compete with important priorities like police and fire protection, parks, and other programs and services. What about the gas taxes we pay at the pump? Well, most of that goes to the state to pay for highways. Cities receive only a small portion, and as the population has grown, your city's share hasn't kept up. It takes a while for a pothole to develop on a city street. However, it just doesn't make sense to defer maintenance. While maintaining our streets may cost a lot, paying for reconstruction down the road costs a whole lot more. All this means that as cities grapple to fund priorities, we need to ensure our transportation systems are not neglected. We can't throw future generations under the bus. We all need to work together to make sure these important assets are well designed, constructed, and maintained.
All right, so on to the next slide. So good context to start with there. Here's another kind of context picture here. So what we're looking at is the hierarchy of the city streets. So the city of Port Orchard is shown in white here, surrounded by the county in gray. We have our primary arterials, the freeways or the state highways shown in orange here. You can see that 16 kind of cuts the city in half, bisects the city going north-south. To the south of here, we have, of course, Gig Harbor and the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, and north is Bremerton across Clare Inlet. And then Highway 3 also heads out to Belfair to the west. On the next order of things, we have the city's, well, we have a couple of state highways that are principal arterials as well, that one to the north, Highway 166, that turns into Mile Hill, that's Bay Street. And then also to the south, we have Sedgwick or State Route 160, which heads on out to southward to the east. And completing almost what you might consider a business loop would be the city's only primary arterial, which is Bethel, which connects the two highways. And then in the hierarchy, we proceed to a number of other secondary arterials, which are shown in green, collectors shown in purple. And in the background, you can see the numerous local access streets throughout the city. So one of the reasons I wanted to start with this is it's important to think in these terms because as the city grows, most of the level of service issues we have are going to be on these major roadways that you see here, mostly intersections, but some segments. And then also on the preservation side with road preservation, these are the roads that are going to also break down the fastest, where we want to make sure we focus or prioritize our funding for those roadways. Next slide. In our world of transportation, we also have a number of planning tools here. Of course, we start with the comprehensive plan, which has a chapter on transportation. And then behind all that, we have a traffic model that the city has that we update routinely as the city develops. We have a pavement management plan that we use to help plan our pavement preservation. We have an ADA transition plan that helps us understand the needs for our sidewalks and accessibility. We have our local agency safety plan that's relatively new, that also informs us in our decisions to make sure that we understand safety enhancements as we're prioritizing our projects and work. And then when I first came to the city, I felt I was pretty fortunate because we have a number of also system plans that we've done. And an example of that would be the Bethel Sedgwick corridor study. And then last but not least, we have, of course, we update the budget every year and more seriously every couple of years, and the capital improvement program, or capital improvement plan that goes along with that. On to the next slide. So kind of an overview of the work that the committee has been focused on. Again, we completed the first ever local agency safety plan about a year ago. So spent a considerable amount of time on that. The committee itself spent a lot of time talking about looking at more depth at our transportation improvement plan and the street improvement projects and priorities. A lot of that was focused on the first 6 years, trying to make sure we got that or kind of understood the schedule and how we're going to implement these projects as far as procuring funding and funding the projects. We also the committee has spent a great deal of time looking at asphalt preservation, how to fund that, and also the different aspects of that and how we set the priorities for asphalt preservation. We spent a little bit of time on kind of revisiting our ADA transition plan and some of the priorities. Our council's focus has been more recently on how do we get funding for the asphalt preservation or roadway repairs that we haven't been doing. But also we didn't want to forget about the sidewalk, the numerous sidewalk deficiencies that we have. And then, like I said, we did spend a lot of time on the transportation improvement plan update, not necessarily this last time around, but one more cycle ago, we spent a lot of time looking at that. We completed a transportation impact fee update so that growth pays its fair share. Here earlier, that was completed right around the turn of the year, the beginning of the year. And another area of focus has been, because if we look at the amount of money we take in with the transportation impact fees, it's only going to pay for about 1/5 of the cost of these larger projects. So a big focus has been of my time and the committee's time has been on submitting a number of grant applications. We submitted 6 in 2020 and 4 so far here in 2021. And we were successful in receiving two grants from the Highway Safety Improvement Program and 1 grant from the Community Development Block Program. So some of the things that are unique to the city of Port Orchard is that we are experiencing a lot of growth. We have, I think at last count, we have, as far as just the residential side, I think we had it was over 4,200 units that are currently in some phase of development. So that's putting a lot of stress on the network that I showed earlier, the arterial streets, the collector streets. And so having those transportation impact fees current and in place and leveraging with grant opportunities is going to be really important going forward to make sure that we can deliver on those needs. We also are focused. We also have a pretty large network of roadways and sidewalks that we want to keep in good condition. That's the concept here, is that if we keep the roadway network in good condition, that's far cheaper from a life cycle standpoint to keep the roadways in good condition than if they fail into if they become failed roadways, then the costs go exponentially higher. So it's important that we're fortunate to have a fairly good condition index of our overall roadway network, but we want to make sure we keep it in good condition to be good stewards of our citizens' tax dollars. And then another thing that's unique to the city is we do have a lot of older neighborhoods with sidewalks that are in need of repair, and a lot of them that weren't built in the first place to have accessible ramps and those kinds of things. Next slide. So here's a concept that was presented at the Transportation Committee, where we how we look at our development of our transportation improvement program, which you see there in the center, that block there. We want to build things on a solid foundation of preservation, and again, this ties into the things we were talking about with our roadway surfacing repairs and sidewalks, because if we do go out and have and we build a number of these larger intersection improvements and deliver on these things that are needed for growth, and we're not paying attention to what's going on the condition of the streets around the city and in our neighborhoods, pretty soon people are going to not be as excited about those bigger projects. So that's again, I call that this kind of building on a solid foundation, make sure we have those things covered. And then to the top, what you find is the improvement projects, and that's where we spend most of the money, as you can see with the dollar signs there. But we're largely focused on arterial corridors, and then we have some things areas where we're focusing on centers and neighborhoods like the waterfront area downtown, and some areas that have a city that have some stormwater drainage issues and need of sidewalk extensions and things like that. We don't want to forget about those locations. Next slide. So on to the work plan. So if we go back to that last slide, you can see we're talking about the improvement projects initially, the stuff that's above the line there. We have a number of projects underway. We have the Bay Street pedestrian pathway. We're continuing to work on right-of-way acquisition for that, so we can extend those improvements. We started work on the first of our Bethel corridor projects, the Bethel and Lincoln intersection project, which we received the HSIP grant for. So that currently is at about 60% design. We're working with the utilities to make sure that we have everything understood before we move forward. We're hoping to be able to bid that project next year, but it's too early to tell on schedule because of the we're not entirely sure about how all the utility coordination is going to work out. We may have to slow it down to get some things relocated before we actually get into construction. But I'm hoping we can get into construction this year when school's out of session, but we'll just have to see how that goes. Also on Bethel, we've now selected a design consultant for the phase 1 portion of the project, which is from Blueberry to Salmonberry. We have some developer funds that are a contribution that's going to pay for part of the design going forward on that. So we're excited to get going on that, better position ourselves for obtaining grant funding. Also, as you drive around the city, you will notice that there's a new roundabout going in at the intersection of Old Clifton and Campus Parkway. I'd love to take credit for that here in engineering on the capital side, but that's actually a contingency requirement of a developer, and it's a developer who's building that under our, of course, we're watching what's going on there and improving the various things that go into that, but that's a developer project that's taking place at this time and should be wrapped up here by the end of the year. It's open to traffic. It's down to some of the landscaping and finishing touches with traffic items and things like that. Also on the horizon is our Old Clifton non-motorized project. We've got a segment out there that we want to do we're looking to do non-motorized improvements, a number of wonderful trail networks that have been built out in the communities, out at Mccormick communities, as well as a park there. And we want people to not have to get in their cars to get around. We want them to be able to feel comfortable riding along the roadway and tying into all those wonderful amenities that are out there. And last but not least, we're implementing some LED upgrades starting this is probably going into starting next year to retrofit a lot of the Cobra heads, the street lights you see around town with new LED fixtures for energy conservation. There's also a safety aspect of that. So as we get into the next set of things is the preservation projects that we have planned. We're due to the new funding we've received for road preservation, going forward, we're going to have an annual city pavement repair project, and again, we're trying to avoid the worst first trap and actually make sure we focus the funding in the places where we have the biggest liabilities from a future cost standpoint. So the roads that need attention immediately, that are the ones where we're going to incur the most costs, would be London, Old Clifton. So we'll be out there doing some grind and patch and some crack sealing. We also recently just wrapped up a sewer repair work that included some street elements, some new ADA ramps, some sidewalk repairs, some intersection overlay or reconstruction. And so that was completed this year. And going into next year, hopefully early in the summer, we're waiting to get our permits lined up, but we're looking to advertise it the first of the year, is the Lippert pavement repair project, and that includes some sidewalk elements as well with that community development block grant. Next slide, please. So also on the preservation side, not to be overlooked, is we're increasing the amount of time our crews spend. We're about doubling our budget for crew time to go out there and repair roadways. And one thing that's going to be really critical, that I think is really critical going forward, is the amount of crack sealing we can get done. That's one of our cheaper treatments that can keep our roadways in good condition and keep them from breaking down. So we purchased some new crack sealing equipment here this year, and also I had 2022 down there, but it's actually been purchased. It's been in use, and then also a new grinding attachment for one of our machines, so that we can improve our effectiveness with our patching that we do, that we batch from time to time here at the city. And the last thing, we haven't spent a whole lot of time on planning. We've had more planning in past years, which we're relying on, but we did complete that ADA. We're looking to complete are currently working on an ADA transition plan update, which I have a draft for, and will be coming hopefully in January, February, anyway, early next year, to provide an update on that. Currently, we've got our on-call consultant doing a peer review on that. And we just completed a street lighting study. That was another grant-funded thing where we've that's going to help us prioritize some of the street lighting improvements we need moving forward to keep our roadways as safe as they can be. And we're still, I want to reiterate that we're really focused on trying to find money for projects, and a couple of the upcoming projects we're trying to fund is the Anderson Hill roundabout project, where we have those 2 developer intersection improvements going in, and the city's obligated to complete a 3rd intersection improvement, so we need to deliver that. And then improvements along the Bethel corridor that have already started, but we have additional phases that we need to fund. Next slide. So to wrap things up, here's just a quick pie chart showing how the city is set to spend its dollars in transportation. You can see that we spend about 1% of the dollars, or less than 1%, on our planning. We're currently configured to spend about 26% of our budget on our preservation efforts, and about 73% on our capital improvement program, or the larger projects. Now, keep in mind that of that 73%, the larger piece of the pie there, about half of that comes from grants, and most of the rest of it comes from transportation impact fees. So that's the end of the presentation, and I'd open it up to questions. Mark, feel free to jump in if you have things to add.
No, I thought that was a great presentation, and I'm just here so I don't get fined. So are there any questions for Chris and I? Okay, I think Jay has a question, and John.
Yeah, Chris, great presentation. Thank you for the update. On the citywide LED upgrade, are we getting any assistance from PSC on that financially, or is that just completely in-house?
I'm going to let Mark answer that question, since he's the one that's been working more directly with that.
Okay, and again, that was the citywide, was that the LED?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's supposed to be 100% grant funded. But no, and I just found out here recently that might not be the case. So we're going to kind of work our way through the process. I did sign the first contract today with PSE. So there was one issue about tree trimming that they had included, and they did remove that after we pushed back a little bit on that. And so the number came down substantially. So we'll see how far we get with the funding that's available. I think we have 200,000 through the TIB right now, Transportation Improvement Board, and then we'll reconvene when we get towards the end of that and see how far we can continue to go.
Thank you.
John, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Actually, I've got a couple. Chris, thank you. That was interesting. My question, first off, is that what it appears to me to be is, I guess I would refer to it as a kind of a Band-Aid approach to preservation. We're going to go out and fix the potholes and do a little bit of grinding and sealing, and we're not really doing any overlays. I know we talked about doing an overlay on Lippard in the past, and I think those are, personally, I think they're have a much longer benefit than some of the preservation things. Chip seal might be a little different, but I look at Bethel as an example, and you compare the work that we did on Bethel, where we ground and patched strips. That was not that long ago, and it's already starting to fail. But when you look at the section of Tremont between Bethel and the bridge that we did the complete overlay, that is still like brand new. So I'm wondering, is there a way that we can do a bit of both? Not quite so much the peanut butter approach, trying to do a whole city a little bit at a time.
I'll jump in first, Chris. So Lippert, I believe, is an overlay, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, Lippert is an overlay. And we are doing, so the one thing that I guess Chris didn't cover is we're still have the contracted work that we're going to do, where there may be sections that we do overlay.
But John's right. Other than Lippert, what we're trying to get out there is go out there and get ahead of some of these things and make sure that our roads don't break down, so we can incur larger costs. Now, overlays are going to be, because of the kind of traffic we have and the amount of traffic we have, are going to be, there's a number of roadways that where chip seals aren't going to work, and where we're going to need to do overlays in the future.
Right.
And one of those will be what we're looking at is Lund, but for this first go around, we're trying to get out there and patch it and seal it, because we don't have the money right now to do the overlay.
Right.
No, I appreciate that. And that's part of our responsibility, is to get you the money so you can do hopefully both as we move forward. The next question that I have, in light of the infrastructure package that the president just signed, and there's a fair amount of money in there for roadway improvements and bridge.
John, you froze on us.
So I'll just jump right in there where we're starting until he comes back. But yeah, when I was at Bainbridge, we were able to get in when there was some set aside for road preservation, and we may have that kind of opportunity coming through KRCC too, and we'll want to position ourselves for that, I would think, if we get that opportunity.
Right. I want to throw a caveat though.
Which is,
Oh, John's back.
There he is.
So
You muted, John.
why I drop off, I apologize. But my question was related to the infrastructure bill that was passed back in DC, and there's a fair amount of money. And basically, are we in a position yet with projects so that we can start competing for some of those dollars? Or do we have some projects that we can focus some attention on, as an example, Bethel Road, so that project might be able to compete for some of those federal funds?
Well, I think I'll jump in here, Chris, really quickly. So a project like Bethel Phase 1, for example, that we only have enough money to get us from 30 to 60%. So that's a project that we're working on. And if we were able to get some of that infrastructure money to actually complete that project, I would think that would be something that the Public Works Department could probably deliver. My concern is, and I think Finance Director Crocker would agree, right now the Public Works Department, and you probably don't want to hear this, is that right now we're pretty stretched to the point to where I think there's some concern if we're going to even be able to deliver just on the projects that we got funding through the Public Works Board, for example. So
yeah,
we've actually,
and we have the ARA funds for a number of utility projects, so that
we added that ARPA money as a new project. So it's one thing getting the money, but it's another thing being able to actually perform. And I'll just say we're currently not pursuing funding right now because we don't have the ability to deliver. And that's just an honest, transparent, this is where we're at. I think we're very cautious of any more money that we're going to add, because we don't want to take money that we can't deliver. So
Let me, Cindy's had her hand up and then Scott has, but I want to just interject from what Mark just said. Some of the federal dollars that we compete for this next spring will be a federal transportation competition at KRCC. And those dollars would need to be obligated in 25-26. What the challenge, I think, is for Mark's group is to get projects to a point that would compete well, that we could deliver in 25-26. It's really a matter of timing. And the other thing, John, that I've heard is we don't know yet how the money's going to be dispersed within Washington State. So how much will PSRC actually get that we would be able to compete for? All of those things are in question. So I know that we're all looking and anxiously waiting for answers to what the distribution process is going to be. Cindy?
I'm just wondering if you could, Brandy, could please show some of the photos of equipment that was included in our packet. And you may answer Scott's question first, but I thought it would be great to have this on the record of the equipment we do now have and what that looks like.
Okay, well, she's looking for that. Scott, do you want to have your question or comment?
Sure. Thanks, John, for asking the question. I found that to be a curious question as well, and I'm glad for the discussion. I've got two questions. One is, how are we doing with our ADA improvements? I know that we are slated to tackle a handful annually. And then maybe at the very end of our discussion on this tonight, we can talk about where we sit with Gorst.
Okay, Sean? Oh, there. Do you want to review what these are, Chris or Mark?
Sure. So the top of the slide here, this just shows kind of the operations we have, some of the treatments that we use. So the grind and patch and is typically what's that's where we come out with. You can see a grinding machine there on the left. That's the most effective way to take up the asphalt, or we need to do the patching. And then you've got a spreader box there and a dump truck loading asphalt, and then you can see the roller there smoothing out the asphalt or compacting the asphalt so that it stays up in place. What's shown there is kind of more of a patching operation, but the same kind of thing would take place with overlay. We just typically with an overlay we'll have more extensive patching and preparation before we do the overlay. On the bottom left is the basics of a chip sealing operation there. Basically put down layers of rock and chips or aggregate, and we can do, depending on the amount of traffic we have, we can do multiple layers. Often we'll use a kind of a larger rock initially, and then another smaller diameter rock for gradation for having a little smoother surface on the roadway. The advantage of chip seals is that we don't have to do as much preparation. So do less patching, grind and patch like you see above, and a lot of crack sealing. And so the costs for preparation are much lower, and therefore chip seals are half to a third of the cost of an overlay. And then what you'll see there in the bottom right is a crack sealing operation. And I don't think that's our crack sealing trailer, but ours looks pretty similar to that we've been using. And with our roads, a lot of our roads are typically are in fairly good condition. So this is one of the cheaper treatments we can use to make sure they stay in good condition.
Chris, what trips a project over from chip seal into grind and patch?
So like I was alluding to earlier, a number of our roads they just have too much traffic, too high volumes of traffic, or too much truck traffic where the chip seals is not going to last. On the other hand, with a number of the roadways that we have, maybe some of the collectors that don't get as much traffic, or even some of the secondary arterials, depending on the traffic, we can get those chip seals to last 10 to 15 years. So it really just depends on the location.
One thing I will say is that a chip seal isn't a very urban friendly road treatment. It's basically the top course is just tar with pea gravel, and then that's brushed off onto a shoulder. So you're not going to have a formal drainage system. It's going to be a neighborhood that has roadside ditches, no pedestrian, no sidewalks. It has, for urban environments, it does have limited application.
Thank you. Sean?
Do we have one of those chip sealing machines? Did we buy one of those?
No, that kind of, any of the overlays or the chip seals are going to be work that we contract.
So we we supplement our staff by contractors.
Yes.
That's exactly right. That's where this concept of an annual pavement project comes in, where we're going to be doing a lot of grind and patch and some overlay and some chip seal. Maybe maybe we can do chip seal in a couple of years. We'll have enough roadways to batch together to do a chip sealing project.
And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I jumped in front of somebody back. I apologize.
Oh, no, we just finished that piece. That kind of, I think, wrapped that up. Sean, I'm not sure what area you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it was actually on this very subject. It was perfect timing. So, I've been in other cities where chip sealing seems to be pretty darn effective. And can you talk a little bit about the process where they use some sort of like a powder additive that makes the strength of that chip seal increase by like 5 to 10 times?
Yeah, I guess I don't know the specifics of the powder additive. I mean, we use some, we use the emulsions, and maybe some of that is in the standard WashDOT specs. I'm not sure. I can tell you that in my experience with Bainbridge Island, that there's chip seals there that are gone to 16, 17 years in their lifespan.
Seems like we have a lot of roadways that fit that profile, that it's not necessarily that urban feel as Mark explained.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll have more limited use for them, but they are a very cost-effective way, and we really want to be careful about our applications of treatments and making sure that we're using the lower cost treatments early and often, and keeping the roads from breaking down, because that's going to be far more cost-effective. And there's hope, right? Because we have a pretty good pavement condition index. We're at 69. When I started at Bainbridge, I started with a 61. We were able to raise that to 64 over about 6 or 7 years. But we were really mindful of the type of treatments that we're using, and making sure we had good strategies to address the roads that would break down quicker, and those kinds of things. So just as a comparison there, so we there the steady state, the amount you're supposed to spend every year according to the report to keep the roads in static condition was about 1.43 million per year. We spent about $600,000 to $1 million a year and we only had the $1 million with the funding that was getting funneled through on the preservation set aside through KSRC. But we were able to raise the condition index with less money than was indicated for steady state, from 0.61 to 0.64. So if we have a good approach, and we're consistent with it, and we stick to good strategies, we can probably beat what's out there. For us, we're looking at about I'm sorry, I was giving the numbers for I'm getting the numbers for Bainbridge. I was looking down at my notes and I was quoting Port Orchard as Bainbridge. But the point is that I think we can beat our target numbers with less money. I think we can actually deliver more and keep our road conditions higher if we have a good strategy and approach.
Scott, and then John.
I don't know I think we just jumped over this question, but what percentage of our ADA transition plan is done?
So we'll get into that when I provide the update here early next year. Okay. But it's going to be a pretty low percentage. I mean, we've identified probably a couple hundred locations that need to be addressed, and we've probably addressed maybe a dozen or so of them in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and just as a clarifier, I don't think the ADA transition plan is like it's based on a percentage of, we're not like we have in the ADA transition plan, they basically said you should budget $1 million a year towards ADA. It's just a moving target. As far as every new development, we have ADA infrastructure that comes in at current ADA standards. So that's adding to, turning areas that don't currently have anything, green. But I think it's hard. I think it's difficult to think of is that we're kind of carving towards 100% completion, because it's really, that's really not the metrics. We're trying to look at changing areas that are deficient, red or yellow into green. And, and we are making headway, especially with a lot of our capital improvement projects, and then what we can then carve out as, ADA improved areas. But again, our biggest issue there is time and funding. I know Bremerton received a grant where they were able to do a bunch of curb ramps along Burwell, but that was, they got a grant for all that and they were to hire that out. So it's, we're doing what we can, and Chris is tracking how much, from an inventory standpoint, but it's not really a percentage based.
And I presume we go after the most egregious ADA or out of compliance ADA areas first, right?
Yeah. Well, and as you remember back to the discussions we had with the committee, is we're looking at locations like, well, where do people need to get to the bus?
Yeah.
And where do people need, where are the parks and the services that the city and the county provide or others provide that people need to, within a few blocks there, we want to make sure that those areas are accessible to people. So there's kind of priorities that we're trying to address. And with the Sydney sewer repair project, some of that work will couple with the work the county is going to do. And so we're hoping that that'll make the county campus and the nearby park more accessible, as well as for people walking to downtown to the ferry and that kind of thing.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the federal dollars, and I appreciate what you're saying, Beck, but what I'm hearing from folks back in DC is that this infrastructure package is in addition to the normal process, and that the Congress is very interested in getting these dollars out quickly and to work quickly. And they're going to be looking for, I guess the term is shovel-ready projects. That's why I asked my question about, do we have any projects, or what can we do to get some of our projects like Bethel competitive?
So there are a couple areas that we're currently making progress to that end, and Bethel would be one of them. We're trying to get started so we can get the things lined up so we can get into a right-of-way phase and get some of the permits further along and things like that.
Great. My other comment was that these dollars are being distributed over a 5-year period. This is not just a one-time infusion of dollars. So, and again, these are kind of in addition to what the normal process is for distribution of federal funds. Now, I agree with you, just exactly how they're going to be distributed to the communities is yet to be determined, I think. And, there will have to be some discussion about the competitive dollars and how we all compete for those. But it's unprecedented in the amount of dollars that's been allocated to the U.S., and certainly the state of Washington has, its fair share coming, I guess. So, and
were you on the PSR Transpol meeting last week? Because there was a little bit of a conversation about the infrastructure package at that meeting, and Kelly McGurty, who is the lead of the transportation area at PSRC, indicated that the state was putting together a group of people to talk about the distribution, and MPOs would be part of that. I'm assuming the transit would be part of that. I know that the Peninsula RPTO has, at our legislative reception, talked to our legislators that they can't forget the rural needs in divvying out that money too. So I think it's something what we really, really want to stay on top of.
I agree.
How that distribution is going to play out. Yeah.
Where I was at, and unfortunately I missed the council meeting last week, is I was at a meeting that we were talking with some of the federal officials, and they were, although they're not quite sure, there's a lot of different disciplines involved in it, Department of Transportation and Railroad and everybody else. The clear message that all of them were saying is that they want to get the money out quick, and they want to get projects going quick. So I'm not quite sure, other than, there's money. And the other comment, maybe if we currently don't have the staff, that we should consider, I think that's why God made consultants and contractors, is to supplement our current needs so that we can be competitive. Because I think this is an opportunity that we really need to pay attention to. So that's
Exactly.
it.
And I'm going to make one more comment before I call on Mark. And I believe you were there, John, when the Peninsula RPTO met with, there were 4 legislators at our meeting. And one of the senators said that, and we were talking at that time, it was a potential infrastructure package. And she was saying that it's going to be important to take some of that money and do some one-time projects with it. Some of the bigger projects that are going to be hard to finance in other ways, through normal channels. And I assumed that she was talking about things like the bridge across the Columbia and some things like that. So I think we can expect a chunk of what comes to us is going to go to major projects of statewide and even national significance. So, but we do need to stay on top of it. We need to be prepared.
The nice part, I think, is that the way that this bill was structured, they have allocated funds to specific purposes. They have a bucket, if you will, that is for bridges. They have a bucket that is for the fish culvert issues. So they have specific dollars identified for roadway improvements and, broadband and everything else. So yeah, we need to pay attention and keep. Thank you.
Mark,
So
and
I
then
guess-
we'll wrap this up because we need to let Nick talk about comprehensive plan stuff.
Yeah, so for those of us that remember the ARRA funding with the Obama administration, it's basically deja vu. It was the term shovel ready came out, and so they were looking for shovel ready. So we do have one shovel ready project, which is the Anderson Hill Clifton, that we've been told by TIB we're never going to get funded through them. So we actually have one plan that's ready to go, right away design. And that's a $2 million that we could take tomorrow, get it out to add and build it. I think the other project that if it wouldn't qualify necessarily under shovel ready, but it's advanced enough that if we could get money to advance it further, it'd be the current Bethel Phase 1 Salmonberry to Blueberry. That would be the other one that I would say we could probably take on. But that's pretty much it, because we do have a lot of water and sewer infrastructure projects that we're also working on. So if the ARA funding does come in that says it's just shovel ready, or if this new infrastructure bill is like the ARA funding, then I think the only thing that we have ready to go is the Anderson Hill Old Clifton.
And I would just add to that, I was successful in the past with, we can pretty easily scale up our asphalt preservation because we can put those contracts together pretty simply or pretty quickly. So if we can get money for road preservation, that might be an opportunity, something that could happen pretty much right away. We can design it and build it in the same year.
Scott, did you want us to talk about Gorst?
Well, I just wanted to say, I don't know if, Mark, what you're saying is in contrast to what John was asking, but I'm hopeful that with this, set of one-time opportunities that we can capitalize by hiring outside contract administrators or consultants to help us move these projects along.
Well, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it takes a lot of time and effort to procure that as well. And I would say that we've had recent conversations with the finance department and the mayor where we've literally we've got to slow down because we're over our skis right now. So that isn't a magic bullet either. So if there's, like I said, if it's ARA type funding that's shovel ready required, we have one project that fits that bill and we could handle that. If we can stretch it to finishing the design for phase one and taking that to construction, then we have a project that we currently have underway, which is Bethel phase one. Other projects beyond that, I think we're getting to the point to where we're not able to perform. And as far as Gorst, I haven't really heard of anything lately.
It's RF funding on steroids over a 5-year period.
And all I can say is if we have, we will always search for funding, but I'm just being cautionary that at some point we have to make sure that we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. That's nothing that we want to do.
Okay,
The other thing
Scott,
that I just wanted to add real quickly is we need to prod the state to get ready for Sedgwick and what needs to occur there, because that's a huge bottleneck and that's theirs. And so we need to push them along.
Yeah, if we could get the Sedgwick 16160 interchange, that's 6 million to the state for that. And then even Sedgwick from Bethel, the roundabout at Bethel and Sedgwick, that's the state's roundabout. If they did that roundabout for us, that would be awesome.
It would be.
Scott, was that all so that we can move to Noah?
Just after we're all said and done, just a quick update on Gorst. I know it's a slow moving animal, but I'd just like to hear the latest.
Okay, Noah?
Yeah, I just want to support what Mark's saying because, I want to support my colleague here, just like I would Nick Bond. I mean, you've heard us over the last few months talk about us running at capacity, whether it's DCD, finance, and public works. So I don't think Mark is being a Debbie Downer. I think he's trying to give you it straight, right? Not to set unrealistic expectations. While we see that great pot of money out there on the federal side, yeah, that sounds great, but we just got a bunch of money, both from the state Public Works Board and the ARPA money that we have concerns about whether we can deliver on those projects. So to continue to add and compound, that's what I think I'm hearing Mark saying is that because we have these conversations about can we deliver on the marina? Can we deliver on well 11? Can we deliver on well 13 and well 12? And those are huge infrastructure projects for our city. And we've just taken on a lot over the last few years, and timing, good and bad, I guess, that's amazing. The infrastructure deal that came out at our current state, I think we're going to be over capacity with DCD and public works and finance. So I think that's what Mark's saying, not trying to be Debbie Downer. I think we take a look at it and look for the opportunities where we can capitalize and compete and use those dollars. But we don't want to underdeliver for the council and the citizens on all our other projects. And those are just the infrastructure. We haven't talked about the capital facilities projects, the city hall, the downtown, the new bank property. I mean, so just the list just continues to go on as we talk about these projects at a staffing level almost every week. So adding more projects doesn't really make us feel great. It kind of raises up the blood pressure whether we're going to actually be able to deliver. But there's got to be some way to look at the positive money come down the line.
Right. We need to move our meeting forward. I really appreciate the conversation we've had. I thank Chris and Mark for bringing us the full council up to date as to what our transportation outlook looks like, what our work plan for next year looks like. And Scott had a question about Gorst, and I know that the mayor represents us on that Gorst coalition. And he's not here, so I don't know, John, you go to those meetings. Do you have an update on Gorst?
Nothing really more than just the fact that these dollars that we've been talking about, Congressman Kilmer is fairly confident that that's going to be able to fund the problem with Gorst. Again, it's a 5-year project or 5-year funding opportunity, so it will be able to fund the various phases since the state is going to have to finish the design work before they can even go out to bid. So I felt pretty positive based on that, but I don't have anything more than just that.
Yeah. So, and I don't know how often they meet, but we will have Brandy write that down somewhere, and perhaps the mayor can give us a more detailed update on Gorst when he's back. Okay. Again, I appreciate all of the comments we've had. It was a good discussion. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate you doing that for us. And moving on down our agenda, we have some comprehensive plan updates to talk about. And I believe that is you, Mr. Bond.
Yes, good evening. The first item that I have this evening are the 2021 Comprehensive Plan amendments. And this is the set of amendments that you have to file your application by the end of January every year, and we can amend our comprehensive plan once per year. So this is our once per year general comprehensive plan amendment. And there are exceptions to the rule for the once per year amendment, which includes sub-area plans, which we'll be talking about as the next item on the agenda. But for now, I wanted to walk you through what are some relatively simple and minor changes to the comprehensive plan. The docket that was adopted by the City Council back in, I think, March or April, included a handful of city-initiated text amendments and an application from a private landowner for a land use map amendment. So the city-initiated text amendments that will be going for their final recommendation to the Planning Commission at their December meeting include an amendment to the capital facilities element of the comprehensive plan. And this is concerning adding new policies concerning the South Kitsap Community Event Center project, which is our library and event center, and making sure that that is in our comprehensive plan as a project now that we've selected a site and have really refined the scope of that project. The next amendment is to the utilities element, and we are updating the project lists for sewer and water to be consistent with those comprehensive planning documents and our CFCs, our project list that was the basis for our CFC calculations. I do want to note that there was one error that was pointed out to me. The 660 zone reservoir that is in your packet tonight is at like $2.2 million. We had amended that value in the CFC rate study to be $2.85 million. And so that will be corrected before it comes to you from the Planning Commission. We are also updating Appendix B to the comprehensive plan. This is all of our documents that are adopted by reference. And so the City Hall space analysis that was done a few years ago isn't referenced in the comprehensive plan right now. We're also referencing the new water system plan, the sewer plan, and we're updating the 6 and the 20-year transportation improvement programs. Also, we're removing a reference to the old Blackjack Creek plan from 1987 and replacing it with the new one that was approved in 2017. So those are just things that we're adopting by reference. And if for some reason there's something in one of those documents that helps us with a grant application or that involves the city contributing money to a project, having them in a reference in our comprehensive plan is all that we're trying to accomplish there. Finally, I mentioned the 6-year tip, which is also part of Appendix B, but I think it requires special mention. Every year, Public Works, I work with Mark and Chris and the Transportation Committee, and we refine the 6-year tip and the 20-year tip. Some of those projects slide out a year or two if we get funding in a certain period, or depending on where we're at with the project design. And so we're just updating it to reflect the amended 2022 budget. The site-specific map amendment, this is the He property, which is it's a portion of a property along Bethel, and it's just east of the I think it's the China Sun restaurant. And so it's the back half of that property, which is actually only accessible from Salmonberry. They own 2 parcels of property, and the smaller one, they want to give it zoning to match the larger property so that they can develop that whole site consistently. And so they've been waiting patiently for that to be approved. And the biggest holdup on why we haven't brought this forward sooner is that we were waiting for our parks plan to be finished, and our parks plan consultant has not finished the work updating that. And I do not believe we're going to have that in time to adopt the parks plan this year. So we're removing the parks plan adoption from this year's comprehensive plan amendments, and that allows us to adopt what was submitted by private applicants and the city initiated amendments. And we will continue working on the parks plan early next year. And I think there's still a way to get our eligibility for applying for parks grants if we choose to go down that road. I know we talked about applying for some funding related to the community event center and doing some of the plaza and site improvements around that building. So I think that we can adopt our parks plan sort of informally in the same way that we do our water system plan or our sewer system plan before folding it into the comprehensive plan later next year. So those are the 2021 comprehensive plan amendments. And like I said, they still have to wrap up with the planning commission here on the first Tuesday of December, on December 7th. And then they will be coming to you at one of your 2 December meetings if everything goes as planned. So are there any questions?
Scott? And then Jay.
Just an observation. I'm hopeful that we can still apply for Parks Rec grants. But at the same time, I feel like there was a little bit more left to do that, frankly, staff had asked us to look at doing in terms of prioritizing some of the projects in the draft plan that was presented at land use. And I don't think that was given the attention that was warranted at the time. And so I think we have a bit of a gift here, and that we'll be able to make it a better product.
Jay?
Hey, Nick, I may have misplaced where I read this in this item, but I think I read that we had no military in our city borders. The National Guard doesn't come under that?
Not, you're talking about military centers?
Yes. I mean,
no, there's only 5 actual bases in Kitsap County, and that's not considered a base.
Okay.
And so the military bases are recognized as equivalent to a local center, but I don't even think we're amending those policies. So I think you're looking at existing text in the plan rather than.
Yeah, I just was curious. That's all. I didn't know whether, how state looked as opposed to federal. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments on the comprehensive plan amendments? Seeing none, Nick, we can move on down to your next agenda item, which is the McCormick Urban Village Subarea Plan.
Yeah, thank you. And Brandy, is it possible to give me permission to share a graphic during this presentation, or do I need to send it to you?
No, you should already have the permission.
Perfect. So the next item on the agenda is the McCormick Urban Village Subarea Plan and Overlay District Regulations. And if I'm going to take you back a few years, back when we adopted the 2016 comprehensive plan, we started down a path of the center's approach to planning, where we're trying to identify areas of concentrated growth and activity in the city where we want to really focus investment. And they're scattered all over the city. Downtown as a center, Mile Hill as a center, there's centers on Bethel. And one of the centers that we had identified was a McCormick Center, which is something that goes back in the McCormick master plans from Kitsap County going back about 20 years. So we also talked about this a little bit as we were negotiating development agreements with McCormick Woods, that this is something that was a priority for the city council to have some amount of commercial development to create a destination on the west side of the freeway that would give residents of McCormick Woods something that's close to home that they can go to for dining or gathering, that doesn't involve trying to navigate our increasingly congested transportation corridors to get to the other side of the freeway in the evening hours. So the work on the sub-area plan began in early 2021, and we really partnered with the landowner out there, McCormick Communities, who bought all of the old entitlements, and they put forward, they hired some consultants to help with concept planning and developing some of the graphics that you see in the draft plan. And then the city really took it upon itself to do the outreach to the public in terms of surveys and public hearings, and also into actually drafting the development regulations to implement the plan that has been created. So the process for this began actually with McCormick Communities going and meeting with the HOA at McCormick Woods. They had a meeting, I think it was in March or April of 2021, where they had pretty good attendance. I think there were more than 50 people who came to an online meeting where the owners of McCormick Communities presented kind of some photographs of what was inspiring this planning effort, and really sought to answer questions and solicit input from the HOA side of things. And that was something that was attended by city staff, but we really didn't lead or participate in. City staff really kicked this off. We then took the list of participants that McCormick had attend this meeting, and then we also sent mailers to residents in the area, and started the Planning Commission with, we kind of walked through the same presentation, the same graphics with our planning commissioners. And we also did an online survey where we really tried to figure out what was most important to the residents if there was going to be a kind of an urban village concept of a center out here. And we heard, I don't think I was particularly surprised by what we heard. I think that there were strong passions about preserving trees and kind of green space and the aesthetic that you see at the entrance to McCormick Woods. If you remember back to the Parcel A subdivision, there was a lot of pushback about cutting down trees and changing kind of the feel of the entryway. And so that was certainly something that was expressed in this public outreach process. People were generally supportive of having places to go, whether it's restaurants or coffee shops, places to gather. They wanted, walkable streets, places to sit, street furniture, just a really welcoming pedestrian environment. And so the concepts that McCormick's consultant had started developing, really, the public sort of confirmed what path they were on. And then we sort of refined the plan a little bit as we got more and more input, until eventually we had a draft plan to present publicly. So before you tonight, I mentioned there's both the sub-area plan as well as the overlay district to implement that plan. And so I want to talk to you first about the sub-area plan. And I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see the concept plan. Is everybody seeing this on their screen? All right. So the areas in white at the top of the page are existing entitlements where on the upper left, this is the McCormick Village Division 1 subdivision. It was 84 lots, and Tri Point Homes is currently constructing houses there. On the upper right of the screen, this is a final plat that is likely to come to you in the next 3 or 4 weeks. It is McCormick Village Division 2. And this is one of the old entitlements that came from Kitsap County that was previously approved. So we're not approving anything that is kind of above this east-west line, and that's not the focus of the overlay district regulations. What we're interested in is everything between Figley and what used to be called Campus Parkway and has now been renamed McCormick Village Drive, and then north of Old Clifton and south of, it's labeled here Road 1, but it's actually now known as Yarrow Road Southwest. So the commercial area, as you can kind of see, is in the eastern area of the park, right off of the new roundabout that's just about wrapped up off of Old Clifton. You will see that there's a parking area here that is kind of built into the roadway. This is actually constructed and in place, and this is a future parking area for the western entrance to McCormick Village Park, which is our Phase 3 McCormick Village Park project. Back in 2010, when our consultant did the park master plan, they identified a second entrance with trailheads, an amphitheater, and an additional restroom, and possibly a picnic area or children's playground. So using that future project as kind of a starting point and an anchor for the neighborhood, we felt that having this kind of commercial gathering space near the entrance to the park kind of created synergies where it really created this destination. In terms of the commercial area, this is not a commercial development like anything we've seen in the city previously. The main access is off of what is called a Woonerf Street, which is a Dutch term for a shared street where pedestrians and vehicles, it's like a 5 mile an hour road, typically with pavers or some kind of textured surface that really tells drivers that this is a different area than a normal road. There is limited on-street parking that can be eliminated and closed for events if they want to have a farmer's market in the area. But the whole area is really designed to be pedestrian oriented and to have these large plazas and kind of outdoor gathering spaces where if you have a restaurant or a coffee shop, there's tons of outdoor seating, there's nice landscaping, there's places where people can go and gather. So what you see here shows about 20,000 square feet of commercial area, and the exact amount of square footage is going to vary depending on what they ultimately design and submit, but we're assuming about 20,000 square feet. And then the rest of the neighborhood is a variety of housing types that are sort of this missing middle residential that we are all hearing so much about in KRCC meetings and at PSRC these days. There are very compact single-family homes. There's detached, everything in the neighborhood is served off of an alley. So everything is alley loaded, which ensures that you have nice front porches, attractive front entries on all these houses, and it's very walkable. You also have a ton of on-street parking so that residents, when they come home at night, can park in front of their house on the street. And when they're gone during the day or when people want to go to the commercial area, they can also share that on-street parking. So it doesn't rely as heavily on exclusive private parking, though every unit in this neighborhood does have a garage parking space, and there is some private surface parking. So again, it's single family homes and backyard cottages or carriage houses where you have an apartment that's above somebody's garage. There are what are called paseo homes, which is kind of like a cottage concept, but a little bit more compact, and it's usually 6 units, and maybe there's a unit built above the shared garage structure on the rear off of the alley. And then there's also these either 6 or 8 unit kind of small courtyard apartment building types. And so not all of these building types as they're currently laid out in this plan are allowed by code now. So the reason that we needed the overlay district was to sort of pave the way for this alternative housing type and to give the developer actually the chance to show that this sort of concept can work, and to provide really the concentration of people in walking distance to this commercial area to make sure that the commercial area is viable. So as I said, you have the plan in your packet and you have the overlay district. The Planning Commission has opened the hearing on this, and it remains open through the December 7th meeting. So we're still taking written testimony at the Planning Commission, and we will take oral testimony as well before they close the hearing and hopefully are able to make a recommendation at their next meeting. So with that, I think I'll hand it off to you, and I wanted to get your thoughts and make sure that we are not going down the wrong path, or that something here is not needing to be changed before the Planning Commission tries to bring this back to you in December.
I was muted. John, and then Scott, and then Jay.
Yeah, Nick, that's very, very impressive. Is that being driven, that design concept, by the developer?
It's both. I mean, we kind of came to the developer and said that the council really wants to see this commercial village take place, and they really wanted to convert everything to residential when we first started talking about a development agreement. And even though the development agreement for transportation that was approved did not include any obligations of the developer to do this, they said, well, we're going to look into it. They've hired Barbara Swift, a landscape architect who's very highly regarded in the Puget Sound area, as well as another planning consultant that helped come up with this concept. And so they're really taking inspiration from a lot of innovative projects. This Woonerf Street is inspired by one of the main streets in downtown Kirkland that was sort of reimagined as this pedestrian shared street. And if you look at the photos that were presented to the Planning Commission in a couple of presentations, it's all very innovative stuff. Lots of indoor outdoor spaces where you can open up, folding or garage style doors to kind of connect the indoor space to the outdoor space and really make the area kind of come alive.
Yeah, no, I was quite impressed in some of the drawings in your handout, and it's really out of the box kind of thinking. It's a great mixture of different types of living units and kind of incorporating that commercial all within kind of a walking distance. So I'm pretty impressed. Yeah, there's a good example right there that I'd be excited to see that come to fruition. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share this image. This is the Woonert Street in downtown Kirkland. And so it's a one-way street that's all at grade. There's no curbs. There's some LID features that are part of the landscaping that handle stormwater, but people can kind of wander from the sidewalk across the street. They can walk down the street. There is some parking during quieter hours, and they may actually close off the street when things are busy or when some sort of event might be happening. But this is something that's been you're seeing more and more in the United States. It's very common in other parts of the country. I did want to also point out that the plan does include some alternative road standards that are slightly different than our adopted standards. And so there's also a residential Woonert where we're providing for a narrow street that does not have separate sidewalks. It's kind of a very low speed, well-landscaped street, but it is a shared street that tries to really maximize the number of units and the kind of the variety of housing that you're going to see here. And so that is part of the plan.
Your photo on page 110 of your handout is somewhat just what you showed, except a couple people walking in that pedestrian / roadway. So great.
Perfect. Scott, then Jay, then Sean and Fred.
I also wanted to echo John's comment that this is fabulous. I applaud the diversity of housing choices that people will have. A quick question, couple questions, I guess. Above the commercial, is this mixed use on the second story? Or are we looking at professional space?
It is allowed to be one single story shop front or mixed use shop front building type. So you can do either. I think if they determine that they can make a mixed use project pencil, they certainly will, but they wanted to sort of keep the flexibility. And obviously if they're going to go mixed use, they will have a parking issue to solve that is going to require underground parking. So they have the ability to do that. The other thing that I didn't mention in terms of the housing types is the site plan that you see generally shows what they have in mind, but they wanted to make sure that this was written in a way that if they decide to take 15 houses out and put, 3 more clusters of Paseo homes in, they wanted that flexibility as they see how demand for housing changes. They wanted to be able to kind of mix it up if they needed to. They also, the Figley Road side of the neighborhood also allows for some live work type units. And so if the high school project goes in the future, or they get the sense that there's going to be more demand for commercial space, we may see some live work stuff off of the Figley side as well. But we really just built that into the plan so it could happen. I don't actually think that's their intent right now. They're just we're trying to build a little bit of flexibility into the plan while still holding them to the commercial concept and the general mix of building types.
Sure. And so my next question is, we saw this at Concept many months ago. I think, Nick, you recall presenting that to us. What was dropped from that presentation, if anything? Do you know?
There's been a few iterations of this. I think the boundaries of the zoning have been tweaked a little bit. There's the commercial mixed use area, and there's the R3 area. And we've added now a residential mixed use, or I can't remember if it's neighborhood mixed use or it's neighborhood mixed use off of Figley, as I mentioned. So that still allows for the houses to be built, but it also introduces the live work unit as a building type. So that was one of the tweaks that we made. Another tweak that we made was in the overlay district, we added a special provision for neighborhood identification signage or kind of the entry monument signage, because they're planning some pretty nice signs at the roundabout that it's going to be really well landscaped, but it'll say McCormick Trails heading into McCormick West, and then McCormick Village heading on the north side of that roundabout to kind of tell drivers where you are and kind of make the place. And that type of signage wasn't currently allowed in our sign code. And so it's something that we may choose to amend and make permanent in our sign code for other areas of the city. But for now, we wanted to get it into the overlay district because they're chomping at the bit to get those signs constructed. So that was another change that you see here.
I think that'll be a vibrant addition to the city. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Jay?
Yes, we did see this several months ago, and this is an amazing drill down from what we saw conceptually. So thank you. My question, and it's kind of both for John and his other hat, is at what point in time do we take a look at incorporating transit in here so we don't have major changes to design, or is it something that we wait until the demand is there? What comes first, the chicken or the egg with transit?
Well, I think, we need to be looking at it fairly soon, because part of the chicken that shows up before the egg is demand responsive needs. So we need to look at it from that perspective before, more of a regular type of service.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had seen this yet, John, or is this something that you would pass on to the transit folks to, at least get any input?
Yeah, no, the transit folks would need to take a look at it and kind of look at it from that eye. But no, this is
That's amazing.
So just to speak to the transit issue, we have coordinated with the transit folks, and we've actually identified a goal in here, and we will require that the developer actually install future transit stop pads. And so we're identifying the location of that as part of the civil engineering review for the site. So I think the intent would actually to bring transit up through the roundabout and through the neighborhood to pick people up and then come out on the Figley end of the project.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for thinking about that early.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I too share enthusiasm for this plan. It definitely looks incredible. That said, with the additional densities, is there anything that needs to change with any of the transportation improvements that need to be made down that entire corridor?
No, when we entered the development agreement for transportation, we built in the concurrency review and reservation for this area. So these trips are accounted for as part of our modeling and our transportation planning. The Figley Road intersection operates, I think, still at a level of service A. So that project really will not get triggered until something happens with a school or until McCormick West is much further along. I don't know if we discussed this at council before, but there is a subdivision up McCormick Village Drive to the north called Sinclair Ridge, and it's in the city of Bremerton, but its only access is coming down this road through the roundabout to the city. And so as part of their mitigation under SEPA, we required them to pay a per unit contribution to this roundabout, and then that gets passed through to the developer. So the roundabout at the intersection was actually designed to handle all of this traffic, and that was how it was reviewed. I think the big missing link, and actually something to dovetail on Mark's and Chris's earlier presentation, is that the pedestrian connection from this roundabout to McCormick Woods Drive to the east, we really need to think about making that connection. And I think that's one of the other projects that could very quickly be made shovel ready. I know that we have money in the budget to design that improvement and have a walkway along the north side of Old Clifton, kind of connecting those 2 points. But I think that's the piece of getting people to the park and allowing people in McCormick Woods to walk to this area rather than having to drive and look for parking over here.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that project is on our docket.
Oh, that's great. And then just lastly, kind of follow on to that is order of kind of operation. When would this be desirable to start for the developer? How does this phase in with all of their other plans?
Well, actually, they are submitting preliminary engineering for informal staff review right now in advance of this being approved so that they can actually submit in January. My understanding is they'd like to break ground on this next summer.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, Nick, I love this the types of residences that are being presented. I am a little curious about the neighborhood reaction. Initially, I had heard some very negative feedback, people thinking that these are very small residences and they would be cramming people there. When I attended the last planning commission, though, the feedback I heard was not so negative as more a concern about the parking and I guess the traffic. Would there be enough of that to handle the residents that might live in such close quarters?
You know, I think that I think you've characterized the feedback correctly, with the exception that they also were very concerned about disturbance of animal habitat and also the loss of trees, of course, which is a hot button issue. But yeah, in terms of parking, it is going to be a little bit different concept because the parking is intended to be on street and it's a shared parking environment. So while everybody does have at least one, even the ADU units have at least one parking stall reserved for each dwelling unit. If people have more vehicles, they are going to be sharing on-street parking, which is a departure from what we've seen in this part of the city. At the same time, anybody who's buying into this neighborhood is going to be aware of that on the front end because we're adopting a plan. And so they, I think, have ample notice of what they're buying into. And if you know, having more vehicles is something that they plan to do, that's, you know, they've got to factor that into their decision-making process. But I do want to point out on that Yarrow Way Southwest or Yarrow Road Southwest on the north end of the subdivision, there is also on-street parking all along Yarrow Way. And there's also even more parking up at, there's a third entrance to McCormick Village Park on to the north of this area where there's an additional 50 stalls that are going to be created. So even if you're not able to park immediately in your house, or if there's an event or something happening at the park, or, you know, it's 110 degrees and everybody's splash pad, I think there's going to be ample parking. It's just, you may have to walk a little bit further at certain times of day or at certain times of the year if something is going on.
Sean, did you mean to leave your hand raised? Okay. And I will just make a couple comments on it. Is when we as a council first did our, and I think it was called form-based zoning or form-based code, I think this is what we were anticipating. But as Nick has told me in the past, when I've asked how that was working, is that most all of our developments were already approved before we came out with the zone-based or the form-based zoning. So this is actually the first opportunity we've seen to have that come to fruition for us. And I think it's exciting to speak a little bit to what Fred's concern about parking and people feeling crammed together. I think the residents who will be living here, that is the type of living they're looking for. And it will be very pedestrian friendly. And many of them may walk to the grocery store or whatever amenities there are in the commercial area. And then I think they will also look for John services to get them to other public transportation, such as the foot ferry or any of the other transportations that we have available. I think it's a new concept, and I can see where people would prefer this type of housing, say perhaps to apartment living. I think it's a great compromise. I think it's a great way to work on that missing middle housing that we have. Are there any more questions or concerns about this? So as I'm understanding it, Nick, there's the public hearing is continued to the next Planning Commission meeting. And then the Planning Commission will make a recommendation, whatever that is, and move it forward to council. Is it important that this sub-area plan be in our comprehensive plan?
Yes. So the development regulations need to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. So in order to adopt this zoning, the plan is kind of providing the Growth Management Act authority for that overlay district to be created. My intent right now is so both the annual comp plan amendment and this sub area will go forward to the Planning Commission on the 7th for the final recommendation. And I'm based on what we've heard so far, I'm expecting that they will advance this. I'm going to my intent is to bring the sub area plan forward at your meeting on December 14th. And then the annual comp plan amendments forward on the 21st. And the reason is both actions have the effect of amending both the zoning map and the land use map. And I think that it is it's very complicated to amend those things twice on the same night, because if one doesn't pass, the changes aren't reflected in the other ordinance, that sort of thing. So we're just going to do them a week apart. And because the developer is so eager to get going on this this concept, we were going to bring the village plan forward first, so that can become effective and they can actually apply for development permits.
Okay, so does council understand that time frame? It'll move to the Planning Commission. We will get the sub-area plan at our first meeting in December, and the comprehensive plan changes at our second meeting in December. Okay. And with that, Nick, we will move right on down our agenda, which is another one of your items, which are housekeeping amendments to the Title 20 of the Municipal Code.
All right, and hopefully this one will go relatively fast. I don't think there's anything too major here. Every year we bring forward an ordinance called a housekeeping ordinance, where we just go to clean up code issues that we've caught over the years where headings are incorrect or we have minor inconsistencies in code. So this year, Carrie, before her last day, helped me get this completed and to the Planning Commission to change all of the things that she was tracking over the last year or so. In the ordinance, you will see a handful of amendments. The first of them is amending the permit type tables. There were a couple of permit types that were absent from the table, and those related to that flood prevention code that was recently updated. We had already had those permit types in our code, and for some reason they were not in the table. We had an inconsistency concerning our cottage court standards. It was changing a minimum dimension from 65 to 60 feet. I had issued a code interpretation earlier this year under the authority given to me under our code. There was a question because we had a picture showing an apartment being configured in a vertical orientation where the units were vertically separated but not stacked one on top of the other. So it was more like a townhome, but it was in the apartment section of the code. And so the developer said, well, we'd like to do apartments. It says apartments are allowed, but we don't want to stack them. We want to vertically put them one after another and have them on the same lot. So we issued an interpretation that said that yes, you can do a vertical and or horizontally separated unit as being an apartment. So we're just changing that definition to be consistent with an interpretation that I had issued. There were a couple of headings that were incorrectly labeled under the public facilities zone. It was, I think when we wrote the code, there was probably some copy and paste for formatting and we forgot to change the headings. And the heading, I think, still referred to the civic and institutional zone. There's a minor change under the subdivision code under 20.88. And I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through my packet here looking for the red line version. I forget what the change to the subdivision code was. And actually, before we go that, there was some language that talked about the expiration of a rezone. And we actually, when we grant rezone approvals, we actually just amend the zoning map. And so the approval of the rezone doesn't revert to the old zoning if they don't do something. It is a permanent change to our zoning map. So we're just deleting that expiration section. There was an inconsistency concerning subdivisions because we previously changed our short plat code to be from 4 lots was the most you could do on a short plat up to 9. But in a different section of code, it still referred to the old threshold. And so we changed the number 4 to a 9 in a couple of places. We deleted the word expiration from the heading of one of the preliminary plat chapters because it included more than just information about how a plat expires. And that's a couple of really minor changes to the design standards, a reference to our public works standards, and a change in our landscape code concerning the size of street trees when they're planted and how we measure those street trees. So again, if you have any questions about this stuff, I'm happy to answer them, but I think it's all really straightforward and it's just cleaning up some inconsistencies in code.
Are there any questions or comments?
Just a quick comment. Thanks for tracking all that stuff over the year. It's kind of time consuming to do it and then act on it, but it needs to be done. So thanks.
Appreciate that. Okay, and so Nick, I'm assuming when we get into these in more detail, we can email you and you'll answer questions or provide additional information for us.
Yes, and I think our intent is to bring the housekeeping ordinance forward as soon as possible, though I need to double check about when our SEPA notice and our Department of Commerce notice timelines fall. We may not be able to bring it to the next meeting. It may have to wait until December, but it will be coming to you as soon as it is able to come to you, unless there's an objection.
Okay, thank you. Well, you had 3 important items down our agenda, and I think that we have completed that. And our next agenda item is vaccination incentives for employees. I don't have any documentation on that. I know that earlier this year, we passed an incentive which would allow all those employees who were vaccinated to get a day off once the threshold of vaccinated employees reached a certain limit, and I believe that was 90%. And I believe that is in effect right now and would sunset at the end of December. And so anyway, I'm not sure what else the conversation about that was.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Ashby, it's my understanding that this conversation is to determine if the city should take the same position as Kitsap County. Oh, I see Miss Lund is here, so she should be able to chime in as well.
Okay, thank you. Debbie, do you want to provide some background here?
This was brought up actually by Councilmember Clausen at your meeting before last, to potentially consider financially incentivizing employees to be vaccinated, as some of our neighboring jurisdictions have done. And it's really just a discussion item to receive direction from the council as to where they'd like to take this.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I think I would start off by saying that with the president's mandate, I don't believe that it's going to affect the city, primarily because his mandate currently is at employers of 100 or more, and I don't believe we have 100 employees in City Hall, but or employed at city, not just at City Hall. But one of the things that was included in that directive is the provision to provide a certain amount of time for the employees who elect to go get vaccinated, time to go get vaccinated. Also, a provision that if an employee does go get vaccinated and has some type of negative reaction, that we would provide, I believe it's up to 2 days, and I might be confusing the transit's policy, but we would provide a certain amount of leave for the employee to recuperate from the potential reaction there might be as a result of the injection. Now, taking it to the next step is providing some type of an incentive to encourage the current employees to get vaccinated. And that I'm aware of range from anywhere you had mentioned, we providing a day off, but I think in our current situation, we provide a day off, as you had indicated, when the entire city reaches a percentage point. And that, my personal opinion, I don't think that's a good approach. First off, 90% is pretty high for trying to achieve a level with simply doing incentives. Kitsap County, for example, and Scott, you may have more information on this, but they're providing, I believe it's $500 to individuals that elect to go get vaccinated. I'm not quite sure what that has done for encouraging county employees. At Kitsap Transit, I implemented a $200 incentive quite a while ago for employees to get vaccinated. And I have some numbers that show that that has been surprisingly effective. In our case, as an example, in October 18th, the overall percentage of employees at Kitsap Transit that had been vaccinated was 70%. And less than a month later, we're up to about 76%. I have some departments that are as high as 92% simply by offering the financial incentive. So they do work. They're not punitive. They're obviously putting the stick away and using a carrot, but they do work. And I think the city should consider something along the lines of incentives for the employees who elect to go get vaccinated. So that was simply my issue that I wanted to throw out for discussion.
Is there any comments or questions? Scott?
Yeah, the county did offer $500 and they offered it fairly recently, and people have already gotten paid out. I've got a handful of employees that work for me, and it did not incentivize any of them. They had already chosen to, so I can't speak to how well that works as an incentive, but at the same time, $500 is quite a bit of money.
Fred?
Is the incentive only for those who have not gotten vaccinated, but choose to do so from this point forward? So it's not retroactive for those who've already chosen to do it?
My program was retroactive.
Okay.
Same with the counties.
Okay, that would seem fair to me, as opposed to penalizing someone who made the decision earlier. I would be more comfortable with something more even across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Sean?
Yeah, I would, again, John, thanks for sharing that data. Just sometimes I wonder, whatever consideration is out there, if it's meaningful enough. This has been going on now so long, but I just think there's a segment of our population that has flat made up their mind. It's just, it's done, right? It's their choice, and it's not about $200. It's not about $500. And I just question all the things we have going on. If we wanted, it's $50,000, I think is basically the math. If we were to do this in all of our, former and current, it's roughly $50,000. And I just don't know if that's in the best interest of our budget right now. With, again, I think people have largely made their decision, but that's just my 2 cents.
Cindy and then Jay.
So where do you stop? Do you give the money for boosters? And how does that all work? Is this only for someone who's never had a vaccination before? I'm not quite sure, because we're in for a long haul of many boosters and all of that. And I'm just, how do you continue to pay for it?
I can tell you in my program, and it's probably a little different. Mine is for the fully vaccinated. It doesn't address boosters at this point. And as I said, it's strictly voluntary. It's for anyone who had previously been vaccinated and or get vaccinated afterwards. And my response, Sean, is that I was kind of the same opinion, and I really wasn't expecting a major change as a result of it. I was expecting some, but I was pleasantly surprised to see how, for example, September 15th, when I offered it to one segment, one department, that week they were at 52%. And that was just last September. And one could argue that a lot of people had made up their mind, but since September 15th, they're now at 92%. Now, what's changed?
What is our current census, Debbie? What's our percentage?
We currently are at 66% vaccinated.
66. So you're talking about 30 people, 30 team members that we're trying to motivate. So $50,000 expense to try to motivate 30 people. And if 5 or 6 of those did it, that's an awful lot of money, $10,000 a whack. But again, it's just trying to wrestle through the pros and cons.
Yeah, Jay?
No, I'm right now, I'm with kind of leaning with Sean. I understand the purpose of incentive, but, also agree with Cindy that, you're rewarding people for doing the right thing anyway. And where does it stop? In any of the programs, safety or health wise, where it's a public, it's been a lot of disinformation, social media, and I would prefer that we keep focusing our efforts that way and not doing an expenditure on that. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
And I'll put my 2 cents in, and that and then I'll call on you, Cindy. And we had a similar discussion a couple months ago when we came up with the day off, because that was not a hard dollar expense to the city. And the goal at that time, the mayor stated at our meeting when I asked, was to get 100% of our employees vaccinated. And so we came up with a program, and I'm not inclined to change that program until it sunsets in December. It sunsets at the end of the year, and I think this discussion may be appropriate after that. But I think it should be allowed to play out. And also, my personal feeling is all of the employees, everyone that works for this city, their primary concern is public safety and public health. And they know that when they are hired by the city, and I'm not sure that we should have to pay them to be vaccinated. Cindy, go ahead.
I also wonder if there isn't a little different approach. There is an immunity measurement test, ROCHE, that can be given. LabCorp offers a test for $10, and you can actually find out what your level of immunity is to the virus. It's a valuable test. It doesn't cost very much. And that gives everybody an idea of where they stand, because our levels of immunity change. I just recently had it, and I have a relatively low score. And I had all the vaccinations, but it was time for a booster. And after the booster, goes right up to the top. So maybe we need to be looking at that measurement that gives people an educated approach to where they stand. We may want to look into more of that information, a $10 test to give somebody an idea of where they actually are, whether they've had COVID before or not. Our levels change. And I think this educated approach might be a new way of looking at it down the road.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Scott and then Fred. Scott, if you were to unmute, we could hear you.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, I know.
Cindy, I had not heard that there were any reliable tests out there or tests that could be understood. So I appreciate hearing that. I hadn't yet really weighed in on this issue. And when the county did it, it took me and many others by surprise. I felt it was a little late in the game. I felt like people have already made up their mind. Heck, they're quitting high-paying jobs because of these issues. And to me, it would have been most effective if you had launched it upfront and early, perhaps before a lot of disinformation was released. But I'm not sure about the efficacy of doing this at this point in time.
Fred?
I just wanted to jump on what Beck had said about offering the day off. I could see modifying the percentage down from 90% maybe to 80%. But one thing that I wondered about is what if we considered the percentage per department instead of the city as a whole? I would be open to something like that also.
John?
Yeah, I'm not going to follow my sword over this one, and I certainly appreciate everyone's position. And I just wanted to have the discussion in regards to this. I do know some additional data on some of the agencies that did the mandatory vaccine, and the percentages of the number of folks who left their high-paying jobs is surprisingly low. I mean, still people deciding to walk away from their position, but intercity transit, for example, they lost 7% that decided not to get vaccinated. Sound Transit has shared that they lost around 2 people. And now Sound Transit isn't, as far as employee-wise, they're not huge.
Oh, John, we lost you again. We'll go ahead and go to Mark while John comes back.
So last time we were talking about the percentage, I didn't say anything, but I just feel like as a staff person, this needs to be said. The percentage, if the city would consider, giving a day off or whatever, it just needs to be because you got vaccinated. The percentage piece has done nothing but created angst between employees. It's pitted those that have gotten their shot and then the ones that didn't get the shot. Then it's like, you're costing me a free day off. So if you're going to have, I just think it should just, if it's going to have a percentage to it, I would just ask that you just let it sunset, because it is creating angst. And I don't think that was the intention. So again, I'm just being completely honest from a managing perspective of feedback that I've gotten from my staff, that the percentage is creating angst.
I'm going to comment to that because that had been mentioned in previous conversations. So I checked with our human resources department and no problem has been elevated. Any harassment or anything had been elevated to human resources. So what I'm hearing basically is anecdotal information on that. Debbie, has that changed?
Well,
that has not changed to my knowledge.
Right. It isn't raising to the level of somebody going to HR, but that doesn't mean it's not occurring. So if you want to call it anecdotal, that's fine. It's not anecdotal to me, but anyway.
Yeah. So I have not heard any particular direction to give HR staff to work on this. I'm not hearing a lot of support to moving forward with changing it. I heard Cindy offer another idea that may incentivize, or I shouldn't say incentivize, but offer someone to find out if they have immunity or not. So I guess, Sean, go ahead.
I can support this. I appreciate what Mark just had to say. And I think for those that that in good faith, went out and got vaccinated with hopes of getting that day off, I would totally support giving anyone that day off. We could sunset our policy right now, go ahead and pay out that day off for those that did it. And then I love looking into what Cindy had to say. I'm aware of those tests, and maybe that's something we can fund, and maybe that testing, we could bring it into the city. I think it's an incredibly powerful educational tool, because it isn't one size fits all. And if there's an opportunity where they wouldn't have to pay for that, but they're capturing information based on their individual makeup, the chemistry of their bodies, I would absolutely support that as well. So I could move that forward.
And I don't think we can take action tonight, Sean, but I
Correct.
believe we can give direction to
Yep.
staff.
Yep.
I'm happy to look at doing away with the threshold to get the day off. The day off, in the end has cash value.
Correct.
And we were prepared to lose that, or I should say, give that away. So
Right.
I think we should honor that. And I would be curious to know more about the tests as well.
Cindy?
I'll bring some information in. This is something that's been verified, and it's just a wonderful tool, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, that was really important. Thank you for bringing that. So I think our direction to staff, and I'm going to put it with you, Ms. Lund, is to check into the test, the immunity test, and also look at removing the percentage on the incentive program we have now, and perhaps work with the mayor and Charlie in bringing back whatever documentation we would need to look at to entertain making that change.
I can definitely do that. And you have funded a wellness committee, and perhaps the wellness committee could pay for that $10 test. So we will definitely look into that.
Okay, thank you. We will go ahead and move down our agenda, and it has to do with potential revisions to the city fireworks regulation. And I believe this is Nick.
Yes, this is me, but I'm going to pass the buck to the Land Use Committee to discuss and kind of brief the full council on what we have, the conversations we've had up to this point. In the staff report, I kind of outlined the 4 approaches that have been discussed recently at the Land Use Committee, and I don't have a preferred position. It was just brought forward for discussion, and I think the Land Use Committee wanted to get everybody's opinion on the future of fireworks, both the discharge and sale of fireworks within the city.
Okay, and we'll call on Jay because I believe he's chair of the Land Use Committee.
I am.
And I want to know whether we're talking, I will let you do your, okay. So are we talking private fireworks or commercial fireworks? Or are we talking both?
Both.
Okay.
We had a very good discussion about fireworks, and to be blunt about it, and I'll let Scott weigh in and Fred weigh in, we decided to punt it to the full council because we couldn't make a decision on it. We did have the Fire and Rescue Chief come and brief us. We've also had information from Chief Brown, regarding what the chief would like to see. I would like to remind the council that anything that we do would take a year before it comes into effect. So that's one of our reasons for bringing it up a little bit early and not, waiting as we get closer to July. And when we had the discussion, we were, not all over the map, but, there are certain pros and cons about if you do this, what is the impact? We already know there are certain neighborhoods that ban fireworks, during the 4th of July. We know that people have robust discussions. We have anecdotal information about what happens on July 4th downtown with combinations of private fireworks and the firework display, and what happened this year when we moved the fireworks display to the following weekend. So we had no concrete resolution, and we wanted to bring it back to the committee, not committee, excuse me, the council for more input and see if we could reach a resolution. I think that was about where we were. Scott or Fred?
Well, go ahead, Fred.
Okay, well, yeah, there are 4 options here, and the one that was presented to us at a high level was, do we want to ban the sale and discharge of private fireworks in the city? There was no intention to affect something like Fathoms over Sinclair Inlet. I did not support the ban. I've heard from many people who do not like fireworks, who do not like the discharge. And I know the effects on wildlife and pets, and I personally don't like them. But my concern about a ban is how it would be enforced, and would it be reasonable to ban them and then not enforce it? So this is why we thought we wanted everyone to weigh in and see what their feelings were.
So I'll add that moving the fireworks to display to another weekend, a commercial display to another weekend, resulted in a much more sane approach to fireworks. But the other part of the discussion about banning them altogether is that, yeah, you're going to have people, let's say you ban both the sale and discharge by private parties. You're going to have people that will have gone outside the city. And obviously, if the county doesn't play ball, they're really going to hurt us in terms of sales just outside of the city limits as well. But you're going to have people that are going to go get their fireworks and discharge them come hell or high water. But you're going to have a lot of people that are going to abide by those restrictions. And I'll be honest, probably more than a few thankful parents that there are restrictions on fireworks. So my street has become a war zone every 4th of July. And I've witnessed a mortar going off in front of a little girl's face. I have a friend whose son lost part of his hand and eardrum. And so, you know, my personal view is that we ought to talk seriously about whether it's still a responsible thing to do. There are other cities, Bainbridge Island, that has banned them. Fireworks have become ever more powerful and dangerous. And, you know, a lot of that stuff is launched out over water, and what goes into the water are those burnt metals and plastics, and that contributes to the whole issue of microplastics in our marine environment. So I think there are a lot of compelling reasons why maybe we don't want to continue with private fireworks sales and discharge. But I also understand that it's going to be a hot issue with people, no pun intended.
Sean, and did someone else have their hand up? Because I thought I was third in line. Jay, okay. Sean, and then Jay, and then me.
Yeah, Scott, I agree completely with what you just said. I think there's the overwhelming amount of law-abiding citizens that would follow this, right? If you try to do something for the 1%, right, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. But to Fred's point, I do think there would need to be, you know, some sort of enforcement behind it. But I think if we did ban the private sale and the private discharge, I think we probably could bring back the opportunity to have a commercial display on the 4th of July for those same reasons. You know, I think this is, you know, it is about the 4th of July. It is about Independence Day. And I would like to see if we can come up with some sort of commercial display and continue that, which I would support, that we bring it back to Independence Day.
And Jay, and then me, and then Nick.
Yeah, I'd take my hand down because Scott brought up the environmental impact with our shoreline and water to reinforce that. My personal opinion is I don't miss the fireworks in our neighborhood because we're one of the neighborhoods that ban it. You know, I would say that if we did ban it, then I would go ahead and support the 4th of July fireworks display that we've had out of the water. But I think the combination of both of them led Chief Brown to try to say, hey, you know, could we, if we move the date, it would be much better for the police department and some of the issues that he's found. happening, having all the celebrations at the same time. On the other hand, I would agree trying to hold it on the July 4th would be the public display would be much more palatable to me, because we already have, I think it's Paulsbo has it on the 3rd. Bremerton has I can't remember when they do the bridge. But again, those are multiples. So just moving, keep continuing to kick the can down the road doesn't seem like a good idea when the Independence Day is the 4th of July. That's my 2 cents.
And I will continue a little bit with what Jay was saying, is that Paulsbo does there on the 3rd. I believe Bremerton and their fireworks display from the bridge is like the Saturday before the 4th. And Silverdale does their fireworks display over their Whaling Day celebration. So I personally, Scott mentioned that on the 4th of July, his neighborhood is a war zone. And his neighborhood is a war zone because of private fireworks. My neighborhood gets overrun whenever with the commercial display over Sinclair Inlet. And, we've learned to live with that. But I would strongly recommend that we not move it from the 4th of July. I can deal with the 4th of July. I don't want to have to worry about what day are the fireworks, because my neighborhood is overrun from spectators. So I feel pretty strongly that it needs, if we're going to have the commercial display, it needs to be on the 4th of July. If not, I would prefer no commercial display. And the reason that it was successful last year wasn't because we moved it off of the 4th of July. It was because we banned public fireworks, because they were not allowed on any day other than the 4th. So the key to me is banning the personal fireworks. So we'll go Nick, Sean, John, and Cindy.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up one important piece of this. It's not a huge cost to the city, but as we've been negotiating the interlocal agreement with South Kitsap Fire and Rescue, one of the things that we are discussing is who's responsible for actually inspecting and monitoring the fireworks stands once they get set up, and also the fireworks displays. I think we have a solution for the fireworks displays, because I believe the county fire marshal, in working with SKFR, is going to be able to help us with that. Currently, it's SKFR who's actually out doing the inspections of the fireworks stands and making sure that everything is being done safely. And under state law, we are limited in how much we can charge for a fireworks stand. So even though they have to get a building permit for their tent, we're not allowed to charge them for the building permit, because they have a flat $100 fee, which doesn't necessarily cover the cost of us going out and doing inspections or coming back for repeat inspections. So there is a cost to the city that isn't fully paid for in the permitting side of things of the fireworks stands. And I think at last count, we had 9 of them, 9 stands within the city limits. And that's something that we are going to be picking up as part of our fire marshal at SKFR retiring.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, I forgot to add one point. It wasn't too many years ago that, we kind of laughed that, the rain stopped in Western Washington on July 5th, right? And I just think that our weather patterns have changed so drastically. Remember this summer, it was 110 degrees, the leading up to the 4th of July. And I just think that the potential for a massive fire event is so much greater than it was in years past, which is another reason that, I think for public safety, would put a lot of people's minds at ease, especially so many people that live in wooded areas, brushy areas, and we're just so much drier, at least the last few years, than we were historically.
John?
I guess I'm not quite sure where I come down on it. I appreciate everyone's comments. I guess the one thing is that I would continue to support the commercial fireworks on the 4th. I think the issue of the majority of the citizens would follow whatever we decide, which I would agree. Unfortunately, there is a segment of our population that goes to the Indian reservations and buys the fireworks that are not legal anywhere other than on the reservation. And that, I don't know what we're going to do that's going to stop that. The enforcement is an issue. If you don't have enforcement behind it, we're wasting our time, I think. The other thing that, we have something, I believe, in place now that allows the fire marshal to control or limit the sale based on, the fire danger. And to me, that's probably the biggest concern that I have over, private use is the potential hazard of fires, although we've been very fortunate, certainly in Kitsap County, to have nothing major, but still. So again, I'm not quite sure where I will come down on it, other than to say that I will continue to support the 4th of July commercial fireworks.
Cindy?
I also support the 4th of July commercial fireworks in our own neighborhood. I mean, we have a lot that goes on, and during some of those years when it's so dry, we worry, we wet down our roof and all of that. But for sure, we can't give it up completely.
Does that, okay, so what I'm understanding is that it takes a year for anything that we do to alter this code. It takes a year for it to take effect. So what direction, and I'm assuming then we would give that direction to Nick. I heard, I believe almost everyone say the commercial fireworks over Sinclair Inlet on the 4th is supported.
Yes.
And that, yeah, I heard that on the 4th of July was supported. I heard myself say that I would not appreciate it being changed to another date. But I did hear support for the 4th, and I heard a variety of conversation about the discharge of personal fireworks, and that enforcement was an important element for that. But I think if you've banned personal fireworks in the city, they're banned. John? And then Jay?
The other comment I was going to make is in regards to, I think Scott brought it up, and rightly so. What we can do is, if we ban the sale, we're just pushing the sale outside of the city limits. And,
right.
That's an issue too. If they can go to Gorst and buy it, they can still get it.
Right. Jay?
Yeah, I was just going to say, though, that I also want to, I think, piggyback on what Scott said. I think Scott was the one that said it, that you will have people that will follow if we do ban them, that will probably cut down for a lot. I agree that climate change is real, and it's a concern, because we had a discussion, I think, several years ago about leading up to it, when we were very dry about what could we do when we had a problem. I would support actually bringing something forward with maintaining fireworks display on July 4th, but banning after in 2023, banning private sale and use of fireworks in the city of Port Orchard.
I agree, Jay.
I can get behind that. I think at one of our next work studies on this, if we want to have another work study on this, we should have both the police and the fire chief, and maybe even the fire marshal present if he's willing, so that we can make sure all questions asked are answered.
I think that's
Also,
a great idea.
One of the other things I forgot to mention, and I'm kind of stating the obvious, but there's a fair amount of debris that's left over on vacant parking lots. Up to the county parking lot, I see debris after fireworks. I find it in my gutters. And then a lot of the stuff just washes into the stormwater system. And I suspect much of that bypasses the catch basin system that is developed for that. So there are a lot of effects of this that we can manage better.
We should probably also open it up for public testimony as well. This will be
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of people engaged in the conversation, and we've got time as long as we can do this, probably before June, go through a nice public process, take testimony that would still give us the appropriate amount of time if we were to implement anything for 2023.
Okay, Nick, do you have direction now?
I do, and I'm drafting an email to my staff and the city attorney, telling them the direction that you have given me. And it sounds like there's no urgency to have the hearing. Probably sometime early next year would be fine for that, and with an aim of this taking effect in 2023.
That's what I heard.
I think we would have to pass it though, well in advance, so we don't lose that target date. I don't know, we say 1 year, but we don't want any place selling anything at the last minute either. So
yeah, my understanding is that the deadline for applying for a fireworks stand is like in April. I think it's about 60 days out. So we definitely want to have it done in January or February, well in advance of anybody considering placing orders or applying for permits
Next year.
Yes.
Or in 2023.
Well,
right.
yeah, they'll have a year's notice. So
Right. Okay. So again, thank you for your discussion. I think we've had, particularly the last two items, the vaccination issue and the fireworks issue. I've enjoyed listening to the council deliberate on it and everyone bringing forth their ideas and their thoughts. I think that, I don't know, I just think that was important, and thank you. So the last item, we're going to turn this to Councilman Diener, because I know that during the recent election, he knocked on, I think he said over 1,700 doors, and he got a lot of comments from constituents. And I think he wanted to share some of that information. And then Jay, do you want to speak first?
No, I was going to go after Scott for
Okay.
similar reasons, and none of us have we all talk to our constituents, but I think we wanted to bring up some points that we had heard
Right.
during this cycle.
Right. So we'll do Scott and then we'll do Jay.
Okay. Thanks, Beck, for the introduction. So it was about 1,720 if you included businesses, more or less. I hit every quadrant of the city, and in some of those quadrants, a couple neighborhoods, and in a couple other quadrants, many neighborhoods. But I talked to people and I listened to people, and I told them that I would be reporting back to the council what I heard so that they could validate and understand that their voices have been heard. So bear with me if I go through this. I'm going to begin by talking about what I heard about most, and then as I get through my list, it becomes kind of shorter and shorter items, and there's not a lot. But so essentially, in talking with people, where there were concerns, they were led by really three issues, and in this order. It was traffic was the biggest issue. It was wanting new development downtown was the second issue. And then towards the end of the campaign, the election season, homelessness popped to the top. And so that became an issue. Most of the people I talked to, they're not unhappy about the current state of the city. In fact, some said that they were content with how things are going. They said that if they were unhappy, we would know about it. They know how to get a hold of us. They know they can call, they can email, they can come to a meeting. But it was clear to me that many just choose not to be involved, or they only come out issue by issue. So, that begs the very classic issue of getting people to want to be involved, and how do we do that? After listening to many folks talk, I noted that we can always do better in what we do, including getting information out. I led with the principle that the council is committed to improving, and outreach is one of those areas where you can always look at what's better or what's next. And on a side note, I've given this a lot of thought since it was a campaign issue, and I've talked it over with many people. And there are some quick win ideas that we can do, and there are also some retreat items that we can talk about. But to be clear, people are generally not unhappy about our accessibility and our outreach, and many indicated that they know how to be involved if they want to be. And just for context, I checked out the YouTube meeting views from last week. And it was 15. And one of those was my wife going in and listening to some of the testimony. For most people, once we started talking about the state of the city's fast growth, it came down to traffic. Most people agreed that they wouldn't care about additional growth in the city if it weren't for the fact that they feel it when they drive around. And the example that many people can relate to is driving from Albertsons to Lowe's at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, when it can take 15 minutes to go not more than 1/10 of a mile. But it was also helpful to explain that GMA requires development to pay its way, that we had right-sized our impact fees, and implemented capital facility charges so that the current ratepayers wouldn't have to subsidize a new development's use and maintenance of water and sewer infrastructure. And many people were unaware of these things, and they were very applauding these things that we've done. There are some people who are bothered by adjacent development, which is typical. Many people, whenever a new subdivision pops up next door, they're not terribly happy about it. And several in the McCormick area were not aware of the available but as yet undeveloped land supply that was brought in with the annexation many years ago. People were pleased to hear that we were targeting our growth areas with neighborhood plans or sub-area plans. And I was able to relate how the mixed-use developments are intended to provide for many of the local services in that immediate area and keep vehicles off the road. I reviewed how we got to these plans by the council, the planning commission, and others nearly 5 years ago, taking a bus ride to review attractive residential, commercial, and mixed-use development across the water, and that this informed on quality development codes that we then subsequently overhauled in the following 2 years. And so people really appreciated hearing that we made an effort to assure quality development codes were a part of the city. Many people wanted to see new development downtown, which was iterated by some of the existing tenants that I talked to downtown, who lamented kind of the existing building conditions for some of them. I was able to talk about the state of development concept and thoughts on both wings of the town, including the event center. And almost all were pretty enthusiastic about what we're going to see happening in the next 3, 4 to 8 years. I was able to inform on the funding schedule and how we've almost for the event center, and how we've got about 3/4 of the $20 million that we need. And we had yet to reach out to the county and the Port of Bremerton for their spoken funding commitments. So people were happy to know that that event center is not coming out of their pockets. And then concerns about homelessness ramped up very fast in the last few weeks. And there was a lot of discussion with people that there's no magic bullet to solving the homelessness crisis that we have, especially for people who want and choose to live in the woods. I learned from one guy I talked to about the dangerous substitute drugs that are preferred for people who have medical disorders when there's no way for them to get prescription drugs. And methamphetamine is one of those that treats a certain medical condition better than nothing at all. The Rockport neighbors south of Albertsons advised me of their specific concerns about homelessness in their common tracts. And we all heard that there were concerns about the county's jail protocol and how they release people. And I think we're still probably going to have a few more conversations about that. But it was eye-opening for people to hear also about the Boise decision, and that we can't trespass homeless people if they've got nowhere else to go out of public space. So those were some of the major issues. Some of the lesser issues, but important for these people, were managing speeding drivers in front of the homes. That was a popular discussion item. Some wanted speed bumps and some wanted speed tables. Some wanted more police presence. And this ranged from a couple of the widest streets in McCormick Woods to the narrow streets like Advantage Avenue off of Pottery. People asked about pathways, and they learned the many general reasons that I support pathways. Many were also supportive of pathways and are intrigued by a pathway that may someday go from Annapolis out to the McCormick Village Park. I met with one woman who was angrily opposed to the pathway, but had been informed that 20 homes were going to be condemned as part of that project. So again, misinformation out there, and how can we do better to counter that? I explained to people that I couldn't go into a lot of details about the pathway project because of the state of the stage of the project we were in. A few people asked about budgeting and advised that we are required to have a balanced budget. Tree retention and new developments was a hot button issue for a handful of people. And sign permit costs were issues for a couple people, including one downtown business stating that it was just too expensive for the product received and really should be considered kind of a loss leader. One retired policeman asked me to do a ride along so that I could appreciate what our police go through, and I plan on doing that. Neighbors off of Blueberry and Salmonberry expressed continued dismay about busy intersections, and some would love to see a police presence there just to keep cooler heads prevailing. And I was able to get documents to some of those neighbors about the Bethel corridor to show them where we are. But I found that not everything that I wanted was online, the latest tip, for example. Senior assistant programs for water and sewer utilities were an issue with more than a few, with one observing that Gig Harbor residents pay less. And a couple times I heard from single persons in homes that use little water, yet pay for a minimum sewer threshold that they never really meet. And so I guess a simple way to explain that is, let's say they use 20 gallons of water in any one month, the minimum sewer threshold may be treating 30 gallons. So they felt like they were subsidizing others' payments. The Valere Court neighborhood is not happy about a right turn only if Kentucky Fried Chicken develops on that corner across from Fred Meyer. Lower property tax issues was an issue that occasionally popped up. And then there was a few miscellaneous issues, more light poles on Clifton, partnering with county and roads maintenance. This was also a Clifton Road issue, that there's a spring under Guy Wetzel that needs to be dealt with, and that there's flooding at Ramsey that needs to be addressed as well. And then finally, it was amazing how often I was asked about how the council could help support the school development, and what were we doing about that? And so that was just a matter of informing people of our role and the school board's role really in a new high school. But I promised people that I would look into some of these issues, and some people have asked for emails on these issues, and I've already sent a few emails out on some of these issues, as Mr. Dorsey can attest to. And so in the end, it was, I think it was a rewarding experience for me. I did talk to a lot of people. And I'll just say that for the most part, people are happy with the direction the city is going. And so does anybody have any questions?
We'll let Jay and Sean talk, and then maybe we'll take questions or comments from all of them. So it'll be Jay, Sean, and then Fred.
Yeah. And I just reminded that Fred was out there campaigning also. So, having that, I don't have a lot to add. It echoes a lot with what Scott said. Mainly the ones that I heard too were support for what the city is doing for vibrant and active downtown, including the pathway, and seeing that come to fruition. Again, some misinformation that was out there. Really a pretty good understanding about the infrastructure that's facing the city. And again, the educational piece, especially with our changes to impact fees and charges. So that was, again, the educational piece on people that I talked to. The budget continues to be one, again, the city's budget, that we have several different pots, and the fact of how much we use grants, it continues to not be of concern to people once you explain it to them. But again, up front where we, we're borrowing money to fix things when we should have it up front. Just the understanding of how it works was an educational piece. Again, I think we're headed in the right direction, obviously, but it's one that how can we keep getting the information out to people? Anything from Janine's doing a great job with our website. What other avenues do we have? That's a question mark. But I think we're moving in the right area and nowhere close to 1,700 doors. But that was what I got from the folks that I talked to and the emails that I got. And by the way, I got more emails and phone calls from the primary through the election than I've gotten in the 4 years I've been on the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and then Fred.
I'll have Fred go first because he'll continue on with the other candidates. And then I've got kind of a follow-on comment.
Okay, Fred.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore some of the things that Scott and Jay brought up. And specifically, I think we could improve things like our websites, but that is part of the outreach that I think we're always trying to improve. Like, what are ways that we can get more information out to people? I have some ideas about that. Another discussion for a future time is the role of social media, if any, in getting information out. And I think actually it can be useful to get information out, and it can be a listening board. It is, of course, not a discussion forum. And so I think there are ways that we can fine tune what we're expecting with something like social media. I also heard about homeless issues. It seemed to be something that was boiling over, especially in the last weeks of October. And a couple smaller things is that people are wondering when we would go back to a regular meeting. But if we continue with Zoom or a hybrid meeting, I think there are things that we may want to iron out in terms of what they can see. For example, when I was on the Planning Commission meeting as not a participant, but as a witness or whatever they call it, you can't really see who else is there. And that's different than being in a meeting where you see who else is in the room. I think they call that attendee, yeah. And the only other thing that we might want to talk about, and this is more for a retreat item, is just sort of clarifying what are residency requirements for someone to run for election in the city limits. It's not as clear as we might think.
That's interesting. Sean?
Yeah, so the title of this agenda item just kind of reminded me of something I've thought about over the last 6 years. And this goes back to our council meetings where we take public testimony. I think there's so many people that don't understand that it's set up to be one-way conversation, so it becomes awkward. And sometimes they have a question, but we can't answer the question, which is awkward. And I think that leads to frustration, maybe a thought of there's lack of transparency. And so, I understand our side of it and what we've been told we can do and can't do, but I'm just wondering if we can't maybe, maybe Brandy could talk to our attorney just to see, is there a way to improve that? Is there a way in the next meeting's council packet that there could be a one-pager on the comments that were brought forth from the previous meeting and provide responses to those? Because a lot of times there's a lot of misinformation, so here's an opportunity to correct that and be on the record with it. But also, it's just awkward. I think you probably all have felt the same thing at times, and it would just be nice to have some sort of closure on the comments or questions that are brought forward. So it'd be interesting if we could get some opinions on that and how we could do better.
Scott?
Yeah, I totally agree. There was a meeting not too long ago where during, I think it was the final testimony, the mayor said, we can't take questions. Well, I don't know if he meant to characterize it like that. They get to say whatever they want, including asking questions, but it comes across really, and I think, Sean, you characterized it best, awkward, when we just sit there and stare with blank faces at whoever's providing that testimony, when the vast majority of people don't understand that this is a meeting in public. It's not their public meeting. And so I've been thinking about the same thing, Sean. Could we, when we introduce the testimony, opportunity to testify or give comments, could we say something like that, we can't answer questions. This is not a Q&A session, but feel free to reach out to email me or any council member or all the council members. I think we can do better. And I'd like to talk more about all of this together, because I think Jay has got some ideas. I think Fred's got some ideas. I think we all have ideas. I came up with some ideas as well. And I wish it was my idea, but my wife was able to find that Gig Harbor does something like an executive summary of their council meetings, where they have what I call the elevator speech of, here's what the issue was, here's why it was important, here's how it was voted upon, and here's what it means to you. And so that's something, that's additional work, of course, but that's something that maybe we should consider doing, because heck, we've had 3-hour meetings and packets that are over 400 pages, and people are not going to dig through that stuff. But if we could provide this summary information for people so that they could understand in a matter of half a minute why this one item that they are concerned about was handled or addressed the way it was, I think we'd be doing ourselves a huge favor.
Okay, Sean, I'm asking, is that an old hand raised? Okay, then we will go Cindy, Mark, and then John.
So just a little bunny trail. There's so much misinformation about the pedestrian pathway out there that it's mind-boggling. I'm wondering if there's something that we can do on our website that actually has all the information about funding, about what has been passed and not, and when, and head some of this off by just having a fact page about some of these hot topic issues where we can refer people to that keeps them informed about where we're at, and also then explaining that certain pots of money are dedicated for certain kinds of projects, that kind of thing. To maybe, I'm seeing more of that all the time. And then there are people who purposefully spread misinformation, and there's not much we can do about that. But if we had a sort of fact page that was just kind of basic, anyway, it goes along the line of what we're all talking about. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, we're going Mark, John, and then Scott.
So a couple things. So Cindy, I do agree, even though if you remember, it was just a couple of years ago that we had that whole presentation, where we had the timeline and everything that had happened. But I think we could prepare an FAQ type of document that we could just refer. As far as questions that are asked, I mean, pre-COVID, if somebody asked questions, they would be assigned to staff to follow up with staff. Now, that doesn't get the information back to everybody, but if somebody had a specific question, Brandy would field it, or I would take back, I'd be assigned to respond. So I don't know if it's a COVID Zoom thing where we've gotten away from that, but it used to be that staff would be assigned for certain questions to respond. So that tool is out there.
Okay, John?
Yeah, somewhat along the same lines as Mark. We used to have a method for which we would respond back at previous meetings. Not all, a lot of times, as Mark indicated, that staff would answer the question directly. The problem with that, though, is that we as council members don't see closure necessarily to the issue, and we still feel like there might still be things hanging out there. But I very much appreciate and welcome this conversation, because I think we've all felt that, as Sean put it, awkward feeling that, we kind of sit there like bumps on the log while they're wanting some kind of a response. But the only other thing I would say is I would caution redirecting people to individual council members, because what are we going to do as individual council members other than ask our staff, which we technically need to go through the mayor for, or we bring it back to the table for council discussion, because as we all know, as individuals, we're just a member of the team. So, but I really think having this discussion further, whether it be at the next work study or a retreat or something, I think it would be great to kind of throw all these ideas out on the table and see if we can come up with something that provides feedback to not only the people that are giving public comment, but also for us to know that there's closure on the issue as well. And maybe there's a little bit of a preamble in our prior to opening up for public comment that we share the issue with people before they even get up to the microphone, that what they can expect. And we're not here to have a discussion, a back and forth dialogue, but just more get their comments and questions, and we'll respond later.
Scott.
Well, I think I'm going to probably dial back what I have to say. John, that's a good point. What can we do if somebody emails me? I simply pass that on to the mayor and Mark or Nick. And I think maybe I was just trying to be a little too helpful, but also going to what Cindy was saying, we bought that canned software some years ago and it was a great deal, but I'm wondering if there's a way we can add a module to it, or a hot button page where we can get people pointed to that very easily. I know that we have a search feature and that works pretty well. But it's not working well. Fred's shaking his head. But if we can point people to that so that they know where they can go to get dedicated information, I think that would be helpful. And I've got some other ideas. I think maybe we can share them at a future work study. Thank you.
Well, and very quickly, we do share the C-Click fix with the county. That's a documented process that we could literally say, any question you have tonight, you can go to the C-Click fix. Then it gets routed to the correct department, and you could do a summary. You could do a quick in the packet. It could just be that 2 weeks worth of C-Click fix, because the C-Click fix has the complaint and then the response. So there's a mechanism that's kind of a platform that's already there that could be utilized.
So a lot of great ideas. So what I heard this evening, and I appreciated very much, was what our citizens were telling our council candidates when they were out doorbelling. So we have very fresh information. I appreciate that. And we will continue this conversation at a future work study, or perhaps even the retreat, because I think all of our goal is to get the public the information they're seeking. And everything that has been said this evening points in that direction. We all want to get the information out. What's the most efficient and effective way to do that? Again, we've had some great conversations tonight, and thank you. It's too bad the mayor had to miss it, but he can look at our YouTube video and hear all about it. We have had a long meeting this evening. I appreciate your time and attention, but do we have anything for the good of the order? Was that just a wave goodbye? Oh, Cindy has something for the good of the order.
We just have 3 trees left to be sponsored. So I just wanted to share that downtown.
While you're talking about trees, are we going to decorate ours? What's the plan for our tree?
10 o'clock on Saturday morning, tree number 46.
Tree 46, 10 o'clock Saturday. Okay.
Yeah.
10 o'clock Saturday.
Do we need to bring a ladder?
I'll have a step ladder there.
Okay.
And the city hall trees coming in tomorrow.
That's not really work-related business, but does that need to be noticed in case there was 4 or more of us?
We'll go ahead and notice it just in case for some reason city business happens to show up, or somebody stops by while you guys are decorating and talks to you. So we'll make sure it gets noticed.
Okay.
It's not that big of a tree, guys.
Oh, that's great. And I would just want to remind everyone that the KRCC legislative reception is December 2nd. Please let our clerk's office know if you want to attend. The orientation is at 5:30. And Brandy, if you could make sure that our council member elect is invited to that orientation and that legislative session.
I will.
Okay, thank you. And with that, is there anything else for the good of the order? Okay, I thank you all for your time this evening. It's been a good conversation this evening. Thank you all.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Hi,
Good
everyone.
night.